Save my boy. Please. Save my boy. Margaret Caldwell's fingers clawed at the dirt road, blood dripping from her split lip as she dragged herself toward the small figure lying motionless 20 feet ahead. Her ribs screamed with every inch she moved, her vision blurred. But her son, her 8-year-old son, wasn't moving. She would crawl through hellfire itself to reach him. And somewhere behind her, hoofbeats were getting closer. If you want to know what happens to Margaret and her son, subscribe to our channel and stay until the end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The hoofbeats stopped. Margaret heard boots hit the ground, heard spurs jingling as someone approached. She didn't look up. Couldn't look up. Every ounce of strength she had left was focused on moving forward, one hand clawing dirt, then the other. Dear God Almighty! A man's voice, deep, rough with shock. My boy! Margaret's voice came out broken, barely above a whisper. Please, my boy first. She felt him move past her, heard his footsteps quicken toward where Hank lay crumpled in the dust. Margaret finally let her head drop her cheek, pressing against the hot summer ground. The Colorado sun beat down mercilessly, but she barely felt it anymore. He's breathing, ma'am. The stranger's voice carried back to her. Knocked out cold, but he's breathing. A sob escaped Margaret's throat, relief so powerful it hurt worse than her cracked ribs. Thank God. Thank God. She heard the man lifting something, her son, she realized, and then his footsteps coming closer. A shadow fell over her, blocking out that punishing sun. Ma'am, I'm gonna need to move you now. You understand? Margaret tried to nod, but her body had finally given up. She'd pushed it past every limit getting this far, keeping herself between Hank and those men for as long as she could, and now there was simply nothing left. My name's Samuel Thornton. The stranger said, his voice gentler now. I ain't gonna hurt you. You got my word on that. She wanted to laugh. A man's word. What was that worth? She'd learned the hard way what men's words meant, but she had no choice. None at all. Just keep him safe, she managed. Then darkness took her. Samuel Thornton had seen plenty of bad things in his 38 years. He'd watched men die in the mud at Antietam, held his best friend's hand as life bled out of him in a field hospital. He'd buried his wife and daughter in the hard Ohio ground 6 years ago. He thought nothing could shock him anymore. He was wrong. The woman in his arms weighed barely anything, but the damage done to her was substantial. Someone had beaten her methodically, not in a rage, but with cold precision. Her face was swollen, one eye nearly shut. Dark bruises circled her wrists like bracelets. And the way she'd been crawling, he reckoned at least 2 ribs were cracked, maybe more. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, small for his age with the same dark hair as his mother. Someone had struck him hard enough to knock him unconscious, but there was no blood. Sam had laid him carefully across the saddle, keeping one hand on the child's back to steady him. His horse, a steady buckskin named Ranger, stood patient while Sam figured out how to manage this. All right, he muttered to himself. All right. He couldn't leave the woman. Couldn't leave either of them. The nearest town was 10 miles east. His ranch was 5 miles north. No real choice at all. Sam lifted the woman as carefully as he could, but she still moaned in pain even in her unconscious state. He mounted up awkward, holding her against his chest while keeping the boy steady ahead of them. Easy, Ranger. Nice and easy. We got precious cargo. The horse seemed to understand, moving at a gentle walk that ate up the miles without jarring his passengers. Sam kept his eyes moving as they rode, scanning the horizon for any sign of whoever had done this. The road they were on led from Silver Creek toward Denver, well-traveled enough that someone doing violence in broad daylight was either desperate or powerful enough not to care about witnesses. Neither option sat well with him. Ruth McAllister was hanging laundry when she spotted Sam coming over the ridge. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He'd gone to town for supplies and was due back around this time. Then she saw how he was riding. Slow, careful, holding someone against his chest. She dropped the shirt she was pinning and ran toward the house. "Samuel Thornton," she called out as he approached. "What in heaven's name? Get the spare room ready." Sam cut her off, his voice carrying the tone she recognized from the war years. Command voice, she called it. The voice that meant no arguments, no questions, just action. And heat water, lots of it. Ruth was already moving. 58 years old, and she could still outwork women half her age when necessity demanded. By the time Sam had dismounted and carried the woman inside, Ruth had fresh sheets on the bed and a fire going under the biggest pot she owned. "Lord have mercy," Ruth breathed when she saw the woman's face. "Who did this?" "Don't know yet." Sam laid her down gentle as he could. "There's a boy, too. I'll fetch him." A boy. But Sam was already gone, returning moments later with the unconscious child in his arms. The boy was starting to stir, his eyelids fluttering. "Put him in your chair by the fire," Ruth directed, "where I can watch them both." Sam did as told, then stood there awkward, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Ruth knew that look. Knew what it meant when Samuel Thornton didn't know what to do with himself. "Out," she said firmly. "I'll tend to them. This ain't work for a man's eyes." "Ruth." "Out, Samuel. I mean it. You want to help, you saddle up and ride back to where you found them. See if whoever did this left any trail." It was the right thing to say. Gave him something to do, some way to channel whatever was building up inside him. Sam grabbed his hat and was gone without another word. The first thing Margaret became aware of was softness. After days of sleeping in wagon beds and hard ground, the sensation of an actual mattress beneath her felt almost foreign. The second thing she became aware of was pain. It radiated from everywhere. Her ribs, her face, her wrists, her back. The third thing was a voice. A woman's voice, gentle but firm. "Easy now, child. You're safe. You're safe." Margaret's eyes flew open, or tried to. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, but her right eye worked well enough to make out an older woman with gray-streaked hair leaning over her. "Hank." The word tore from Margaret's throat. "My son. Where's my—" "The boy's fine." The woman's hands pressed gently on Margaret's shoulders, keeping her from rising. "He's right over there, sleeping in the chair. Woke up about an hour ago, asked for you, then dropped off again. He's just exhausted, poor thing. Not hurt bad." Margaret turned her head, ignoring the spike of pain the movement caused. There, in a worn leather chair by a fireplace, Hank lay curled up under a knitted blanket. His face was peaceful, unmarked except for a bruise on his temple. She started to cry. Couldn't help it. Couldn't stop it. "There now," the woman said, her voice softening further. "There now. Let it out. You've been through something terrible. I can see that plain enough." "I thought," Margaret's voice broke. "I thought they were going to kill him, right in front of me. I thought—" "But they didn't. And you're both here now, and you're both going to be fine." The woman squeezed her hand. "My name's Ruth McAllister. The man who found you is Samuel Thornton. This is his ranch. He's a good man, whatever you might have heard about him. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's got a good heart underneath all that quiet." Margaret tried to process this information through the fog of pain and exhaustion. Where are we?" "Thornton Ranch, about 5 miles north of the Denver Road, 15 miles or so from Silver Creek." Ruth studied her face. "That where you came from, Silver Creek?" Margaret closed her eyes. Silver Creek, where everything had fallen apart. "Yes." "You running from someone, child?" The question hung in the air. Margaret knew she should be careful. Knew she shouldn't trust anyone. That's how she'd ended up half dead on a dirt road in the first place. She'd trusted the wrong people, believed the wrong promises. But this woman's hands were gentle, and her eyes were kind, and Margaret was so tired of being alone. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm running from someone." Ruth nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. "Then you're in the right place. Nobody bothers us out here, and Samuel Thornton ain't the type to let harm come to folks under his roof." She pulled the blanket up higher around Margaret's shoulders. "You rest now. We can talk more when you've got some strength back." Sam rode back to where he'd found them, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The spot was easy enough to locate: the disturbed earth, the dark patches where blood had soaked into the dirt, the smaller scuff marks where the boy had fallen. He dismounted and studied the ground the way he'd learned to do during the war. Reading the story the earth told. 3 horses, maybe 4, heavy riders. They'd stopped here, spent some time. He could see where hooves had churned the dirt in circles like horses being held, while their riders did something else. Did what they did to that woman and boy. Sam followed the tracks backward toward Silver Creek. They came from that direction clear as day. Then he followed them forward the direction they'd fled after the attack. They led toward Denver. He stood there for a long moment, hat in his hands, jaw working as he thought. Whoever these men were, they hadn't bothered to hide their tracks, hadn't worried about being followed. That meant they were either fools or they were confident no one would dare come after them. Sam was betting on the latter. He mounted up and rode home as the last light faded from the sky, his mind turning over possibilities. The woman hadn't looked like trouble. She'd looked like a mother trying to protect her child. But someone had wanted her dead badly enough to beat her in broad daylight and leave her for the vultures. He needed answers, and he had a feeling getting them wasn't going to be simple. "She awake?" Ruth looked up from the stove, where she was warming broth. "Woke up a couple hours ago. We talked some, then she slept again." "The boy?" "Woke up too, asked for his mama. I told him she was sleeping and he could see her soon." Ruth stirred the pot. "He's a brave little thing. Didn't cry, didn't carry on. Just nodded and asked if there was anything he could do to help." Sam felt something twist in his chest. The boy couldn't be much older than his daughter would have been if she'd lived. "She say anything about what happened?" "Said she's running from someone. Didn't say who." Ruth set down the spoon and turned to face him. "Samuel, that woman's been through something awful. I've seen injuries like that before, not from a fight, not from an accident. Someone took their time with her. Wanted to hurt her, not just stop her." "I know. She's got wedding rings on a chain around her neck. No ring on her finger. Widow, I reckon." "I reckon so too." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" It was a weighted question, and they both knew it. 6 years Sam had lived out here, keeping to himself, avoiding entanglements, avoiding caring about anyone except Ruth. It was safer that way. Caring meant losing, and he'd lost enough. "I'm going to let her heal up," Sam said finally. "Then I'm going to ask her who did this and why. And then—" Sam looked toward the closed door of the spare room. "Depends on her answers." Margaret woke to the sound of her son's voice. "Mama!" Her eyes opened to find Hank standing beside the bed, his small face tight with worry. That bruise on his temple had darkened to purple stark against his pale skin. "Hank!" She reached for him, and he came to her immediately, crawling onto the bed and curling against her side. She wrapped her arm around him despite the pain pulling him close. "Oh, my sweet boy. Are you all right?" "I'm okay, Mama." His voice was muffled against her shoulder. "Are you okay?" "I'm going to be fine. We're both going to be fine." Hank was quiet for a moment. Then, "I tried to stop them, Mama. I tried to fight them, but they were too big and—" "Shh." Margaret pressed a kiss to the top of his head. "You were so brave. So brave. I'm proud of you." "They hurt you." His voice cracked on the words. They hurt you real bad. I know, sweetheart. But I'm still here. We're both still here. Because of that man. Hank pulled back to look at her. The one who found us. Miss Ruth says his name is Mr. Thornton, and he carried us both all the way here. Did she? She says he fought in the war, and he don't talk much, but he's good. Hank's eyes were serious. Is he good, Mama? Can we trust him? The question cut straight to the heart of everything. Margaret had trusted Garrett Winslow, trusted his smiles, his promises, his concern for her welfare. And that trust had nearly gotten her killed. But something in Ruth's manner, in the way she spoke about Samuel Thornton, felt genuine. And there was the simple fact that he'd stopped. He'd seen a beaten woman and an unconscious child on the road, and instead of riding on, instead of deciding it wasn't his problem, he'd stopped. In Margaret's experience, that meant something. I think, she said slowly, that we can trust him for now. But we need to be careful, Hank. We can't tell anyone about Mr. Winslow, or the papers, or any of it. You understand? Hank nodded, his expression far too serious for an 8-year-old. I understand, Mama. I won't say nothing. Anything. I won't say anything. Despite everything, Margaret smiled. Even half dead, she couldn't stop being a mother. The next morning, Sam knocked on the door of the spare room. Ma'am, you awake? Yes. The woman's voice was stronger than yesterday, though still strained. Come in. He entered to find her sitting up in bed, the boy curled asleep beside her. Morning light came through the window, illuminating the full extent of the damage to her face. Sam kept his expression neutral, but inside something cold and hard settled in his gut. Mrs. McAllister said you might want to talk to me, she said. Her good eye met his, steadily assessing him the same way he was assessing her. That's right. Sam pulled the room's only chair over to the bedside and sat. My name's Samuel Thornton. This is my ranch. Margaret Caldwell. She hesitated, then added, This is my son Henry, Hank. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Caldwell, though I wish it were under better circumstances. So do I, Mr. Thornton. They sat in silence for a moment. Sam wasn't much good at this, at talking, at drawing people out. 6 years of solitude had worn away whatever social graces he'd once possessed. But he needed to know. I rode back to where I found you, he said. Tracked the men who did this. 3, maybe 4 of them. Came from the direction of Silver Creek, headed toward Denver after they left you. Margaret's face went pale. You tracked them. Just their trail. Didn't follow. Sam watched her carefully. They weren't trying to hide. Rode straight and confident, like they weren't worried about consequences. Her jaw tightened. They're not. Why's that? Because the man who sent them owns half of Silver Creek. Maybe more. Margaret's voice was bitter. His name is Garrett Winslow. He owns the mining company. And he can do whatever he wants because everyone who might stop him is either in his pocket or too scared to try. Sam absorbed this. What did you do to cross a man like that? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Her hand moved unconsciously to her son, resting on his back as he slept. I worked for him, she finally said. I managed his books, his accounts, everything. She took a shaky breath. My husband died 3 years ago. Left me with debts and a child and no way to pay for either. Mr. Winslow offered me a position. Good wages, reasonable hours. I thought it was a blessing. But it wasn't. No. Her voice hardened. It wasn't. Because 6 months into the job, I started noticing things. Discrepancies. Money moving in ways that didn't make sense. Wages listed as paid that never reached the workers. Land purchases at prices far below market value, always from widows, always from people who couldn't fight back. Sam leaned forward slightly. He was cheating people. He was stealing from them, systematically, thousands of dollars, maybe more. Margaret's good eye burned with anger despite her battered state. And when I confronted him about it, when I told him I'd go to the authorities if he didn't stop, He sent men after you. He smiled at me. Her voice was almost a whisper now. Stood right there in his fancy office, smiled that charming smile, and said nobody would believe a desperate widow over a respected businessman. Then he told me I had until sundown to leave Silver Creek and forget everything I'd seen. But you didn't forget. No, I didn't forget. Margaret's hand tightened on her son's back. I went home, and I gathered every piece of evidence I could find, copies I'd made notes, everything. I took Hank, and I ran. But they caught up to us about 10 miles out of town. And they beat you to make sure you wouldn't talk. They beat me to make sure I'd never talk again. Her voice cracked. They thought they'd killed me. Would have finished the job if they hadn't been interrupted, heard something that spooked them. Horses, maybe. Or maybe they just got nervous about being on the open road too long. Sam sat back, processing everything she'd told him. The evidence you gathered, where is it now? Margaret hesitated. This was the moment of truth, the point where she either trusted this stranger completely or kept the last card she had hidden. She looked at him, really looked, at the lines on his face that spoke of hard years, at the calluses on his hands that spoke of honest work, at the way he sat, not leaning toward her, not crowding her, just present and patient. I hid it, she said, before they caught me. I knew they'd take everything if they caught me, so I hid the packet in a place only I know about. Where? I'll tell you. Margaret held his gaze. If you help me get those papers to someone who can use them, the federal marshal, a judge someone Winslow can't buy, I'll tell you everything. Sam was quiet for a long moment. You're asking me to go against a man who owns a mining company and half a town, he said finally. A man with money and influence and hired guns. Yes. A man who's already shown he'll kill to protect his secrets. Yes. Margaret didn't flinch. I know what I'm asking, and I know I have no right to ask it. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. You've already done more than most people would. So why should I help? It was a fair question. Margaret thought about it carefully before answering. Because there are widows in Silver Creek right now losing their land for pennies on the dollar. Because there are miners working 12-hour days and not seeing half the wages they're owed. Because Garrett Winslow is going to keep doing this until someone stops him. She paused. And because you stopped Mr. Thornton. You saw a beaten woman on the road and you stopped. You could have ridden past. Most men would have. But you didn't. Sam stood up abruptly, moving to the window. He stood there with his back to her, looking out at his land. 6 years ago, he said quietly, I buried my wife and my daughter. Emma was 5 years old. Sarah was 28. Cholera took them both in less than a week. Margaret said nothing, just waited. After that, I stopped caring about much of anything. Sold the farm in Ohio, came out here, bought this land. Figured if I didn't care about anyone, I couldn't lose anyone. He turned to face her. It's worked pretty well so far. I understand, Margaret said softly. And I'm sorry. For your loss. Sam nodded once, acknowledging her words. The thing is, Mrs. Caldwell, I've gotten real comfortable not caring. It's easier. Safer. He paused. But I looked at that boy last night sleeping in Ruth's chair, and I thought about Emma. About how scared she would have been in his place. About how brave she would have tried to be. His voice roughened, and then I thought about what kind of man rides past a woman and child left for dead on the road. What kind of man knows there's evil in the world and decides it ain't his problem? He walked back to the chair and sat down again, meeting Margaret's eyes. I don't know what kind of man I am anymore, Mrs. Caldwell, but I know what kind of man I don't want to be. Margaret felt tears prick at her eyes. Does that mean? It means you're welcome to stay here while you heal. You and the boy both. It means when you're strong enough, we'll talk about what comes next. Sam stood. And it means if Garrett Winslow or his men come anywhere near this ranch, they're going to regret it. He moved toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the frame. "Ruth will bring you breakfast shortly. You should eat even if you don't feel like it. You need your strength back." "Mr. Thornton." He turned. "Thank you." Margaret's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for stopping." Sam nodded once, then left without another word. In the bed beside his mother, Hank stirred. His eyes opened, finding hers immediately. "Mama, who was that?" Margaret pulled him close, pressing her lips to his forehead. "That sweetheart was a good man." And for the first time in weeks, she felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Ruth tended to Margaret's injuries with practiced hands, applying poultices to the bruises, and wrapping her ribs with clean bandages. She was firm about Margaret staying in bed, refusing to hear any arguments. "I've seen your type before," Ruth said on the third day. "The kind that thinks she has to do everything herself, can't accept help from anyone. Well, you can just let go of that nonsense while you're under this roof. You need rest, and you're going to get it, whether you like it or not." Margaret, who had been trying to insist she could at least sit up and mend some of her torn clothing, surrendered with a small smile. "You remind me of my mother." "Is that so?" "She was the stubbornest woman in Boston, could make my father back down with a single look." Ruth snorted. "Smart woman. A good look is worth 1,000 words with most men." Meanwhile, Hank had apparently decided that Samuel Thornton was the most fascinating person he'd ever encountered. "He's got horses, Mama," Hank reported breathlessly after his first exploration of the ranch. 6 of them. And cows. And there's a dog named Jake, who's real old but real friendly. And Miss Ruth says Mr. Thornton fought in the war against the rebels, and he was a hero." "Is that right?" "She says he don't talk about it, but she knows, 'cause she knew his family back in Ohio." Hank's eyes were wide. "He has a whole barn full of tools, and he's teaching me to care for the horses. Can I learn to ride? Mama, really ride, not just sitting in the wagon?" Margaret's heart clenched. She thought of all the things Thomas had promised to teach their son, things he never got the chance to do. "We'll see, sweetheart. We're guests here, remember? We can't impose." "Miss Ruth says I ain't imposing. She says I'm being helpful." "Aren't imposing. And that's very kind of her." But as the week wore on, Margaret began to notice something. Hank wasn't just hanging around Ruth and asking questions about horses. He was slowly, carefully attaching himself to Samuel Thornton. She saw it in the way Hank positioned himself near Sam during meals, in the way his eyes followed the older man around the property, in the questions he asked not just about horses and ranching, but about the war, about Sam's past, about everything. And she saw something else too. She saw the way Sam looked at Hank when he thought no one was watching, a look of pain and longing so raw it took her breath away. He was thinking of his daughter. Margaret was certain of it. "He lost a child," she said to Ruth one afternoon while Hank was outside helping Sam fix a fence post. "A daughter." Ruth's hands paused in their knitting. "He told you?" "Some of it." "Then you know more than most." Ruth resumed her work. "Samuel doesn't talk about Emma or Sarah. Not to anyone, not even to me, and I've known that boy since he was younger than your Henry. He seems good with Hank. Better than I've seen him with anyone in 6 years." Ruth looked up, meeting Margaret's eyes. "That child of yours is breaking through walls Samuel built to last a lifetime. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's happening whether any of us planned it or not." Margaret turned to look out the window. She could see them in the distance, Sam's tall figure and Hank's small one, working side by side on the fence. As she watched, Sam said something, and Hank laughed, the sound carrying faintly through the glass. "He needs a father," she said quietly. "He's needed one for 3 years. I've done my best, but there are things I can't give him, things I don't know how to teach." "And what about you?" Ruth asked. "What about me? What do you need, child?" Margaret didn't answer. She didn't know how. On the seventh day, Margaret insisted on getting out of bed. "I can't lie here any longer," she told Ruth. "I'll go mad." Her ribs were still sore, her face still bruised, but she was stronger now. Strong enough to walk. Strong enough to sit on the porch and feel the summer sun on her skin. It was there that Sam found her that evening, sitting in one of the rough wooden chairs watching the sun sink toward the mountains. "Feeling better," he observed, settling into the other chair. "Feeling alive." Margaret breathed deeply, savoring the clean air. "I wasn't sure I would for a while there." Sam nodded, accepting this. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the colors change in the sky. "Your boy's a good kid," Sam said finally. "Smart, works hard." "He's the best thing I ever did," Margaret smiled. His father would be proud of him. "He died 3 years back. Your husband." "Fever. It came through fast. Took a lot of people that winter." Her voice was steady. She'd made her peace with Thomas's death as much as anyone ever could. "He was a good man. Not perfect, but good. He loved us." "That's more than a lot of people get." "Yes, it is." Another silence. Then Sam spoke again, his voice lower. "I've been thinking about what you told me. About Winslow. And I think you're right. Someone needs to stop him." Sam's jaw tightened. "But I also think you're underestimating how dangerous he is. A man like that with that kind of power and money, he's not going to roll over just because you've got some papers." "I know." "Do you—" Sam turned to face her fully. "Because from where I sit, this isn't just about exposing a crooked businessman. This is about a man who's already tried to kill you once, who knows you survived, who's going to be looking for you." Margaret felt the fear she'd been pushing down start to rise again. "You think he knows I'm still alive?" "I think he'd be a fool not to check. And he's not a fool, is he?" "No." Margaret's hands gripped the arms of her chair. "No, he's not." "So we have to assume he's got men searching for you. Probably already checked Silver Creek, probably checking every town within 100 miles. Sam's expression was grim. "This ranch is out of the way, but it's not invisible. Someone could track you here. Then I should leave." Margaret started to rise. "I should take Hank and—" "Sit down." Sam's voice was firm, but not unkind. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying we need a plan, a real plan. Not just getting those papers to someone, but making sure Winslow can't wriggle out of the consequences. Making sure you and your boy are safe afterward." Margaret sank back into her chair. "You're right. I've been so focused on just surviving I haven't thought beyond that." "Well, you've got time now. Time to think. Time to heal." Sam looked out at the darkening sky. "And you've got help if you want it." Margaret studied his profile in the fading light. The strong jaw, the serious set of his mouth, the lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter, long forgotten. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. "Because I've spent 6 years being a ghost," he said finally. "Walking around going through the motions, but not really living, not really feeling anything." He turned to meet her eyes. "And then you showed up bleeding and half dead, and your boy looked at me like I was someone worth believing in, and I thought—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. "Thought what?" Margaret prompted gently. "I thought maybe being a ghost isn't living at all. Maybe it's just dying slowly." Sam's voice was rough. "And maybe I'm tired of dying slowly." Margaret reached out before she could stop herself, her hand finding his on the arm of his chair. He stiffened at the touch, but didn't pull away. "You saved our lives," she said. "Whatever else happens, that's true. You stopped when you could have ridden past. You brought us here. You gave us a chance." Sam looked down at her hand on his. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. I reckon we saved each other, Mrs. Caldwell." They sat like that, as the last light faded, neither speaking, neither moving. Inside the house, watching through the window, Ruth McAllister smiled and quietly returned to her knitting. Some things she knew had to unfold in their own time. 2 weeks had passed since Samuel Thornton carried a dying woman and her unconscious son off that dusty road, and in that time, Margaret Caldwell had begun to feel something she'd almost forgotten existed. Safety. Not just the physical kind, though, that mattered too, but the deeper kind, the feeling of being somewhere she didn't have to constantly look over her shoulder. She should have known it wouldn't last. "Rider coming." Sam's voice cut through the morning quiet, sharp and tense. Margaret looked up from the bread she was helping Ruth knead to find him standing in the doorway, rifle already in his hands. "How far?" Ruth asked, her own hands going still. "Mile out, maybe less." Margaret's heart slammed against her ribs. "Is it?" "Don't know yet. Stay inside. Keep Hank with you." He was gone before she could respond, the door swinging shut behind him. "Mama!" Hank appeared from the back room where he'd been practicing his letters. His eyes were wide, fixed on the rifle Sam had left propped by the door. "What's happening?" "Nothing, sweetheart." Margaret forced her voice steady, even as her hands trembled. "Just a visitor. Mr. Thornton's going to see who it is." "Should I get the other gun? The one Miss Ruth keeps in the—" "Henry Thomas Caldwell." Ruth's voice was firm, but not unkind. "You sit yourself down at that table and stay put. Your mama and I have everything under control." But Ruth's hands weren't steady either, as she moved to the window, peering out through the gap in the curtains. "Can you see anything?" Margaret asked. "Sam's walking out to meet him. Just one rider, looks like. That's good. Winslow's men travel in packs." Margaret joined her at the window, her shoulder pressing against Ruth's. She could see Sam now, standing about 50 yards from the house, rifle held loose but ready at his side. The rider was approaching slowly, hands visible and empty. "He's raising his hands," Ruth murmured, "showing he's not a threat. Or wants Sam to think he's not." The rider stopped about 20 feet from Sam. Words were exchanged too distant to hear. Then Sam's posture changed, not relaxed exactly, but less coiled. He lowered his rifle slightly. "He knows him," Ruth said. "Look at the way he's standing. That's not how Samuel faces a stranger." More words. Then Sam turned and gestured toward the house. The rider dismounted, and they walked together, Sam still keeping a careful distance. Margaret's breath caught when they got close enough to see clearly. The rider was older, maybe 50, with a weathered face and a medical bag slung across his shoulder. "That's Doc Porter," Ruth said, relief flooding her voice. "Elijah Porter. He and Samuel served together in the war." The door opened, and Sam entered first, followed by the doctor. Porter's eyes swept the room, landing on Margaret with the assessing gaze of a medical man. "Mrs. Caldwell, I presume?" His voice was gravelly, like he'd spent too many years breathing in dust and disappointment. "Sam sent word you needed looking at." "Sent word?" Margaret turned to Sam. "You didn't tell me." "Didn't want to worry you." Sam set his rifle back by the door. "Eli's the only doctor I trust. Figured he should check those ribs, make sure Ruth's patchwork is holding." "My patchwork is just fine, thank you very much," Ruth huffed, but she was already clearing space at the table for the doctor's bag. Porter approached Margaret with the careful movements of someone used to dealing with skittish patients. "May I?" She nodded, and he began his examination with gentle, practiced hands. While he worked, Sam pulled Ruth aside, their voices low, but not quite low enough. "Anything on the road?" Ruth asked. "Nothing good. Eli, tell her what you told me." Porter didn't look up from his examination. Men in Silver Creek asking questions. 3 of them, well-dressed, well-armed. Showed up about 4 days ago, been making the rounds ever since. Margaret's blood went cold. "What kind of questions?" "Looking for a woman and a boy." Dark-haired woman, early 30s, traveling with a child around 8 years old. Porter met her eyes. Ring any bells? They know I'm alive. Seems that way. Porter continued his examination, pressing carefully along her ribcage. You're healing well, by the way. Ruth did good work. Another week or two and you'll be fit for travel. Travel where? Hank's voice cut in. He'd crept closer despite Ruth's instructions, his small face pale. Mama, are we leaving? Margaret reached for him, pulling him against her side. I don't know yet, sweetheart. But I don't want to leave. I like it here. Mr. Thornton's teaching me to ride, and Miss Ruth's teaching me to make biscuits, and… Hank. Sam's voice was quiet, but it stopped the boy mid-sentence. Why don't you go help Miss Ruth fetch some water from the well? Doc Porter's gonna want to wash up. Hank looked at his mother, then at Sam, then back at his mother. Something passed between them, an understanding that seemed too old for an 8-year-old's eyes. Yes, sir. He took Ruth's offered hand and let her lead him outside. The moment the door closed, Porter spoke again. There's more. These men aren't just asking about a woman and child. They're offering money. $500 for information leading to their whereabouts. 500? Margaret's voice failed her. That's a fortune out here, Sam said grimly. Enough to make a lot of people suddenly remember things they might not have noticed otherwise. Exactly. Porter closed his bag. Sam, I came out here because you saved my life at Cold Harbor, and I owe you more than I can ever repay. But you need to understand what you're dealing with. These aren't common hired guns. They're professionals, patient, methodical. They'll find her eventually, no matter how far she runs. Then we don't run. Both Margaret and Porter stared at him. I'm sorry, Margaret said. What did you just say? I said we don't run. Sam's jaw was set in that stubborn line she was beginning to recognize. Running didn't work last time. Won't work this time either. Winslow's got too much reach, too much money. You could run all the way to California and he'd find you. Then what do you suggest? Porter asked. March into Silver Creek and announce yourselves. No, we take the fight to him. Margaret felt her head spinning. Sam, you can't be serious. You said yourself he's dangerous. He is dangerous. He's also a coward and a cheat, and a man who hides behind hired muscle because he can't face his own dirty work. Sam's voice was hard. I've faced men like him before. In the war, plenty of officers sent others to die while they sat safe behind the lines. Only difference is, Winslow wears nicer suits. There's another difference, Porter said quietly. In the war, you had an army behind you. Here, you're one man. 2. Ruth's voice came from the doorway. She stood there with Hank behind her, her chin raised defiantly. Don't you count me out, Elijah Porter. I may be old, but I can still shoot straight. 3. Hank stepped out from behind her. I can help too. Absolutely not, Margaret said immediately. Hank, you're 8 years old. You're not fighting anyone. But Mama, your mother's right. Sam's voice softened as he looked at the boy. Your job is to protect her. Can you do that? Hank straightened his small shoulders. Yes, sir. Good man. Porter watched this exchange with a strange expression, something between admiration and concern. Sam, can I speak with you outside alone? They stepped out onto the porch, but the window was open, and Margaret could hear every word. What are you doing? Porter's voice was low and urgent. I've known you 20 years, Sam. You don't get involved. You don't take risks for anyone. That's how you've survived. Maybe I'm tired of just surviving, Eli. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. A pause. Then Porter's voice again, softer now. It's her, isn't it? The woman. Something about her. Sam didn't respond, but apparently his silence said enough. Sam, I know what you lost. Emma and Sarah, nobody should have to bury their wife and child. But you can't bring them back by dying for someone else's cause. I'm not trying to bring them back. Sam's voice was rough. I'm trying to stop being dead myself. You understand 6 years, Eli. 6 years I've been walking around with nothing inside. No anger, no joy, no nothing. Just empty. And then she showed up and her boy, and suddenly I feel things again. Things I thought were gone for good. That's not love, Sam. That's desperation. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But it's something. And something is better than nothing. Another long pause. Then Porter sighed heavily. What do you need? Information. Everything you can find out about Winslow's operation. Who he pays off, who he's cheated, who might be willing to talk if they knew they had protection. And I need to know about those men searching for her. How many, where they're looking, how close they're getting. I can do that. Might take a few days. We've got time. Not much, but some. I'll send word when I know something. Porter paused. Sam, be careful. You're not the same man who charged that Confederate line at Cold Harbor. None of us are who we were back then. I know, but maybe that's not all bad. When Sam came back inside, Margaret was standing by the stove, her back rigid and her hands clenched at her sides. You shouldn't have done that, she said without turning around. Done what? Made promises. To Porter, to Ruth, to my son. She finally turned, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You don't owe us anything, Sam. You've already given us more than... I haven't given you anything but a bed and some time. Sam took a step toward her. And I didn't make any promises I don't intend to keep. You don't understand. Winslow isn't just going to let this go. Even if we expose him, even if he goes to prison, he has friends. Powerful friends. They'll come after anyone who helped bring him down. Let them come. You could die. Her voice cracked. You could die for something that has nothing to do with you, for people you barely know, and I couldn't... She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Couldn't what? Sam asked quietly. I couldn't bear it. The words came out as barely a whisper. I buried one man I cared about. I can't bury another. The air between them changed. Sam stood very still, his eyes searching her face. You care about me. Of course I care about you. Margaret laughed, but it came out broken. You saved my life. You gave my son hope. You looked at me and saw something worth protecting when everyone else just saw a problem to be eliminated. How could I not care about you? Sam crossed the remaining distance between them in 2 steps. His hands came up to cup her face, calloused thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. Then let me do this, he said softly. Let me fight for something that matters. For the first time in 6 years, let me fight for something I actually care about. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. He rested his forehead against hers. But I'm more scared of going back to being empty than I am of anything Winslow might do. From the doorway, Ruth cleared her throat loudly enough to make them jump apart. I hate to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all, but there's a small person here who's got a very important question. Hank ducked under Ruth's arm and ran to his mother, throwing his arms around her waist. Mama, are we really going to fight the bad men? Margaret looked at Sam over her son's head. His eyes held steady on hers, warm, determined, afraid alive. Yes, sweetheart, she said softly. I think we are. The days that followed were a strange mixture of ordinary ranch life and careful preparation. In the mornings, Sam taught Hank to ride, really ride, not just sit on a horse while someone else led the reins. The boy was a natural, fearless, and quick to learn. Margaret watched them from the porch, her heart aching at the picture they made. Father and son, she thought, then pushed the thought away as too dangerous to dwell on. In the afternoons, Sam worked with Margaret on her shooting. She'd handled a rifle before Thomas had insisted she learn the basics, but Sam taught her things Thomas never had. How to breathe, how to aim, how to squeeze rather than pull. By the end of the first week, she could hit a target at 50 yards more often than she missed. Not bad, Sam said after she'd shattered 3 bottles in a row. "For a city girl. Boston isn't exactly a city anymore, and my father was a merchant, not a banker. I know my way around a working life." Sam smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles that transformed his whole face. "I'm starting to figure that out." But underneath the routine tension coiled tighter every day. Porter sent word on the 4th day Winslow's men had expanded their search. They'd been seen in Reading and Red Bluff, asking the same questions, showing the same money. The net was widening. "How long before they get here?" Margaret asked when Sam shared the news. "Hard to say. This ranch isn't on any main road. They might not find it at all." "But they might." "Yeah." Sam's jaw tightened. "They might." On the 6th day, Ruth came back from town with her own news, and none of it was good. "Floyd Jennings came into the general store while I was there," she reported. "You remember Floyd Deputy Marshal fancies himself important. He was asking about new faces in the area. Anyone who'd recently arrived, anyone acting suspicious." "Did he ask about us specifically?" "Not yet, but he was fishing, and Floyd Jennings doesn't do anything unless someone's paying him to do it." "Winslow," Margaret said flatly. "That'd be my guess." Ruth began unpacking her purchases. "There's more. I talked to Eleanor Hastings, she runs the boarding house. Says there's been 3 strangers staying there for 2 days now, well-dressed men. Keep to themselves, pay in cash." Sam exchanged a look with Margaret. "They're here," he said. "In town." 15 miles away, Ruth corrected. "That's not here yet." "It's close enough." Sam stood abruptly. "I need to ride out. Check the property lines, make sure there's no easy approach I haven't thought of." "I'll come with you," Margaret said. "No, you stay here with Hank. If something happens, I need to be able to find you." She grabbed his arm before he could pull away. "Sam, we're in this together. You said so yourself. That means you don't get to go off alone and play hero while I sit here and wait." His jaw worked. She could see the argument forming behind his eyes, all the practical reasons why she should stay put. But then he looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. "Fine. Ruth, can you watch the boy?" "Can I watch the boy?" he asks. Ruth snorted. "I raised 4 children and buried a husband. I think I can manage one 8-year-old for a few hours." They rode out together, Sam on his buckskin Ranger, and Margaret on a gentle mare named Daisy that he'd said was perfect for beginners. She wasn't quite a beginner anymore. 2 weeks of practice had given her confidence, if not expertise. "Where are we going?" she asked as they crested the first ridge. "North property line. It butts up against federal land forest mostly. If someone wanted to approach the ranch without being seen, that's the route they'd take." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of leather and the soft thud of hooves on packed earth. Margaret found herself watching Sam's profile as he scanned the terrain, noting the way his eyes never stopped moving, the tension in his shoulders. "You're expecting them," she said. "Soon. I'm expecting trouble. Could be them, could be something else. Out here it's best to always expect trouble. What a lovely way to live." He glanced at her surprised, then laughed a short, rough sound. "You've got a mouth on you, Mrs. Caldwell. I've been told that before, usually by men who didn't appreciate having their wisdom questioned. Their loss." Sam pulled his horse to a stop at the crest of a small hill. "This is what I wanted to show you." From this vantage point, Margaret could see the ranch spread out below them, the house, the barn, the corrals, the winding dirt road that connected them to the main route. It looked peaceful, vulnerable. "3 ways in," Sam said, pointing. "Main road from the south, back trail from the east comes in through that stand of oaks. And this." He gestured to the forested land stretching out to the north. "Anyone coming through these woods would be invisible until they hit the tree line. That's about 300 yards from the house." "Can we block it somehow? Fell some trees?" "Could, but it'd take weeks. And it wouldn't stop determined men, just slow them down." Sam turned his horse to face her. I brought you up here because I want you to know the lay of the land. If something goes wrong, if they come, and we can't stop them, you need to know how to get out. I'm not running again, Sam. I told you. I know what you told me. But your boy needs a mother more than he needs a martyr. His voice was harsh, but his eyes were gentle. If I say, run, you run. You take Hank and you don't look back. Understand? Margaret felt her throat tighten. And leave you behind. If that's what it takes. No. The word came out fierce. I won't. I won't let my son watch me abandon someone else who... She stopped, her voice catching. Someone else who what? Someone else who matters to him, who matters to... She couldn't finish, couldn't admit out loud what she'd been trying not to feel for days now. Sam moved his horse closer until their knees were almost touching. Maggie. The nickname, one she hadn't heard since Thomas died, broke something loose inside her. She looked at him and saw everything she'd been afraid to see. A good man, a broken man, a man who was offering her something she'd thought she'd never have again. I can't lose anyone else, she whispered. I know that's selfish. I know you've got your own reasons for fighting, but I can't watch another man She stopped, horrified at what she'd almost said. Sam's hand found hers, wrapping around her fingers and holding tight. Maggie, he said again, softer this time. What if we both stopped losing? What if we tried winning for a change? Before she could answer, a sound cut through the quiet, the sharp crack of a gunshot, distant but unmistakable. Coming from the direction of the ranch. Hank, Margaret breathed. They were riding before the echo faded, pushing their horses as fast as the terrain allowed. Margaret's heart pounded so hard she could barely hear anything else. Ruth and Hank were alone. Alone with whoever had fired that shot. Please, God, she prayed under her breath. Please, please, please. The ride back felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. When they finally came over the last ridge and saw the ranch below, Margaret's relief turned to confusion. The house stood intact. No smoke, no visible damage, no signs of violence. Ruth was standing on the porch with Hank beside her, both of them looking out toward the barn. What happened? Sam demanded as they pulled up. We heard a shot. Ruth pointed toward the barn. Someone tried to get in through the back. Didn't see anyone inside, just heard footsteps in the loft. I fired a warning shot and they took off running. You gotta look at them. Just a shadow. Man-sized, moving fast. Sam was already dismounting. Stay here. All of you. Sam, Margaret started. Stay here. He disappeared around the side of the barn, rifle raised. Margaret wrapped her arm around Hank, who was trembling despite his obvious efforts to appear brave. You did good, she told Ruth. You kept him safe. That boy was ready to grab the poker and charge out there himself, Ruth said with a shaky laugh. Had to practically sit on him to keep him inside. I could have helped, Hank protested. I could have... You did help. Margaret knelt down to meet his eyes. You stayed safe, which is exactly what I needed you to do. That's the most important thing you could have done. Sam emerged from the barn 5 minutes later, his expression grim. Tracks lead north into the woods. Just one man, but he was watching the house. Got close enough to look through windows before Ruth spotted him. A scout, Margaret said. Her fear had transformed into cold clarity. They sent someone to confirm I was here. That's my read too. Sam's eyes met hers. They know now. They'll be coming. Ruth stepped forward. How long? Tonight if they're impatient. Tomorrow morning if they're smart. Sam looked at each of them in turn. We need to talk, all of us, about what happens next. They gathered around the kitchen table as the sun began its descent. The room felt smaller than it had that morning, the walls closer, the air heavier. The way I see it, Sam began, we have 3 choices. First we run. Pack up tonight, head west, try to disappear before they can mobilize. That won't work, Margaret said immediately. You said it yourself, Winslow has too much reach. I know, but it's an option, and I want it on the table. Sam continued. Second choice, we stand and fight. They come to us, we use home ground advantage, try to take them down when they make their move. How many of them? Ruth asked. Porter said 3 in town. Could be more we don't know about. Could be fewer. 3 against 2, Ruth calculated. Not great odds? Better than running and getting picked off one by one on open ground. Sam's jaw tightened. Third choice is we don't wait for them to come to us. We go to them first, tonight, while they're still planning. Catch them off guard. Margaret frowned. That sounds like a good way to get yourself killed. Maybe, but it might also be our best chance. Right now they think they have the advantage. They think we don't know they're coming. If we move first... No. Margaret's voice was firm. I won't let you walk into a trap. It wouldn't be a trap if... It's not your decision to make alone. She held his gaze. We're in this together. Remember, that means we decide together. Sam opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in his expression shifted frustration, giving way to something else. Something that looked almost like respect. All right, he said slowly. Then let's figure this out. Together. In the end, they chose to stand their ground. Not because it was the safest option, there was no safe option anymore, but because running meant leaving everything behind, and fighting on unfamiliar ground meant giving up every advantage they had. We know this land, Sam said, as they finalized their plan. Every ridge, every gully, every approach, that's worth more than numbers. They worked through the night preparing. Sam reinforced the doors and shuttered the windows. Ruth gathered supplies and prepared for what might be a long siege. Margaret checked and loaded every weapon they had while Hank, despite his protests, was tucked into the root cellar with strict instructions not to come out until his mother came for him. I want to fight, he insisted. I want to help. Margaret knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. You're helping by staying safe. That's the most important job there is. But Mama... Henry... She made her voice firm. I need to know you're protected. I can't focus on what's coming if I'm worrying about you. Do you understand? His lower lip trembled, but he nodded. I understand. She kissed his forehead, breathing in the smell of him, dirt and soap, and that particular little boy scent she'd know anywhere. I love you, she whispered. More than anything in this world. I love you too, Mama. When she emerged from the cellar, Sam was waiting by the door. The first gray light of dawn was creeping over the mountains. He's secure. As secure as I can make him. Margaret took the rifle Sam handed her. What now? Now we wait. Sam took up a position by the front window. And we pray I'm right about these men being impatient. They didn't have to wait long. The riders appeared just after sunrise, 3 of them, just as Porter had said, approaching down the main road with the confidence of men who didn't expect resistance. They wore dark coats and rode good horses, and even at a distance, Margaret could see the gleam of metal at their hips. Here they come, Sam murmured. Ruth, back window. Make sure nobody's circling around. Got it. Ruth moved with surprising speed for her age, positioning herself with a clear view of the rear approach. What about me? Margaret asked. Stay low, watch the left side. If you see movement, you don't hesitate. Sam's eyes met hers. Maggie, if this goes bad? It won't. If it does, the cellar door opens from inside. You get Hank and you go north into the woods. There's a hunting cabin about 2 miles in. Stay there until... It won't go bad. Margaret reached out and gripped his arm. Because you and I aren't done yet. We haven't had a chance to... She faltered. There's still so much I want to... I know. Sam covered her hand with his. Me too. So let's make sure we get that chance. The riders had stopped about 100 yards out. One of them, the leader by the looks of him, raised his hands in a gesture of parley. "Samuel Thornton." The man's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "We've got no quarrel with you. We're here for the woman and the boy. Send them out, and we'll be on our way." Sam didn't respond, didn't move. "Come now, Mr. Thornton. Let's be reasonable. The woman is wanted for theft and murder. You'd be doing your civic duty turning her over." Margaret's hands tightened on her rifle. Murder. They were still pushing that lie. "Last chance, Mr. Thornton. Send them out or we come in and get them." Sam raised his rifle, sighted carefully, and fired. The shot kicked up dirt less than a foot from the lead rider's horse, sending the animal dancing sideways in panic. The message was clear. "I could have killed you. I chose not to. Don't make me change my mind." "Wrong answer," the leader called. Then he spurred his horse forward, the other two following, and suddenly the shooting began in earnest. Margaret had never been in a gunfight before. Nothing could have prepared her for the chaos, the thunder of gunfire, the screaming of horses, the way time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. She fired when she saw movement, ducked when bullets tore through the window frame beside her, reloaded with trembling hands that somehow remembered what Sam had taught her. She saw one of the riders go down, clutching his arm. Then another shot sent splinters flying past her face, and she dropped to the floor, heart hammering. "Sam!" she screamed over the noise. "Are you—" "I'm fine. Stay down." The gunfire slowed, then stopped. In the sudden silence, Margaret heard horses' retreating hoofbeats fading into the distance. She raised her head carefully, peering through the shattered window. The road was empty. One horse stood riderless about 50 yards away. A dark shape lay motionless in the dirt. "They're falling back," Ruth reported from her position. "I count 2 riders heading south." "One down," Sam confirmed. He moved to the door, rifle ready. "Stay inside. I'm going to check." "Sam, no." But he was already gone, moving low and fast across the open ground toward the fallen man. Margaret watched through the window, her heart in her throat, as Sam knelt beside the body. After a long moment, he stood and walked back to the house. "Dead," he reported. "The one I winged got away along with the leader. They'll be back." "With more men," Margaret said grimly. "Probably." Sam set his rifle down. "But not today. Not right away. They weren't expecting resistance. They'll need to regroup, get reinforcements." "How long does that give us?" "Day or 2. Maybe 3 if we're lucky." Ruth emerged from the back room. "That's not much time to prepare for round 2. "No." Sam agreed. "It's not." Margaret sank into the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. The aftermath of fear and adrenaline was hitting her all at once, leaving her shaky and slightly nauseated. "I killed someone," she whispered. "At least I might have. I was shooting and—" "You did what you had to do." Sam knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "You protected yourself and your son. That's nothing to be ashamed of." I know, but—" She couldn't finish. The reality of what had just happened, what she'd just done, was settling over her like a weight. "Mama!" She looked up to find Hank standing at the cellar entrance, his face pale but determined. "I heard the guns," he said. "I heard everything." Margaret opened her arms, and he ran into them, burying his face against her shoulder. "It's all right," she murmured, stroking his hair. "It's all right. We're safe." For now, she thought, but didn't say. They were safe for now. But Winslow's men would be back. And next time, there would be more of them. The night after the attack, nobody slept. Margaret sat at the kitchen table with her rifle across her knees, listening to every creak and whisper of the old house. Across from her, Sam cleaned his weapons with methodical precision, the soft click of metal against metal the only sound in the room. "They'll come at night next time," he said without looking up. "Use the dark for cover." "When?" "Tomorrow, maybe the day after." His hands paused. "Depends how fast they can get reinforcements from Denver." Ruth appeared in the doorway, a cup of coffee in each hand. "Boy's finally asleep. Took him long enough." "He saw too much today," Margaret said quietly. No child should have to lose his father at 5 years old either." Ruth set the cups down firmly. "But he did, and he survived it, and he'll survive this too. That boy's got his mother's spine." Margaret wanted to believe that, wanted to believe they could weather whatever was coming. But in the quiet hours of the night, doubt crept in like cold water through cracks in a dam. "I can't stay here," she said suddenly. Both Sam and Ruth looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Sam asked. "I mean, this isn't your fight. It was never your fight. Those men came here because of me, because of what I know, what I can prove." Margaret's hands tightened on the rifle. "If I leave, if I draw them away, they'll hunt you down and kill you," Sam interrupted flatly. "Is that what you want?" "Of course not. But at least you and Ruth would be safe. At least Hank would." "Would what?" Sam's voice rose. "Watch his mother ride off to die, grow up, knowing she sacrificed herself and left him alone. That's your plan. It's better than watching all of you die for my mistakes." The words hung in the air between them. Margaret realized she was shaking, not from fear, but from the terrible weight of choices that all seemed to end in loss. Sam set down the gun part he'd been cleaning and stood. He crossed to her slowly, deliberately, and knelt in front of her chair so their eyes were level. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and intense. "I've spent 6 years not caring about anything, not taking risks, not letting anyone in. And you know what I got for it? Nothing. Just empty days and emptier nights, and the slow certainty that I was already dead, just waiting for my body to catch up." His hands found hers, warm and rough and steady. "Then you showed up, bleeding, broken, fighting for your boy with everything you had left, and something in me woke up, something I thought was gone forever." He squeezed her fingers. "You don't get to take that away from me, Maggie. You don't get to ride off and die and leave me with nothing again." Margaret felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Sam, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we fight this together or not at all. That's the only choice that makes sense." For a long moment, Margaret couldn't speak. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. "Together," she whispered. "Together." Ruth cleared her throat pointedly. "If you two are done being sweet, we've got planning to do. Those men aren't going to defeat themselves." Sam straightened, but kept hold of Margaret's hand. "She's right. We need a strategy. We can't just wait for them to come back." Margaret said, her mind finally starting to clear. "You said it yourself. They'll bring more men, more guns. The odds will only get worse." "So what do you suggest?" Margaret took a deep breath. "The evidence I hid. It's still in Silver Creek. If we can get it to the federal marshal in Denver." "That's 100 miles, Sam interrupted. "And Winslow's men are between us and there." "I know, but think about it. Right now, it's our word against his. A widow and a recluse rancher against one of the most powerful men in the territory. Nobody's going to believe us without proof." "She's got a point," Ruth said grudgingly. "Paper talks louder than people in a court of law." Sam was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he thought. "Where exactly did you hide it?" "The church. Father Morrison's church on the edge of town." Margaret's voice steadied as she spoke. "There's a loose board behind the altar. I put everything there the night before I ran, figured it was the last place Winslow's men would think to look." "They might have found it by now." "Maybe. But Father Morrison is one of the few people in Silver Creek that Winslow hasn't bought. If the papers are still there, he'd protect them." Sam released her hand and moved to the window, staring out into the darkness. "Silver Creek's 15 miles from here. If we leave before dawn, we could be there by mid-morning. Get the papers, get out before anyone knows we're there. And if someone does know, then we improvise." He turned back to face her. "It's risky. Damn risky. But you're right, we can't win this thing hiding out here waiting to be overrun. I'm coming with you, Margaret said immediately. Maggie. Don't. Her voice was sharp. Don't tell me to stay behind while you risk your life for my problem. I know where the papers are. I know the town. You need me. Sam looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Fine. But Ruth stays here with Hank. Like hell I do. Ruth crossed her arms. You think I'm going to sit here twiddling my thumbs while you two ride into the lion's den? Someone has to protect the boy. Then take him with us. Absolutely not. Margaret and Sam spoke in unison. Ruth's eyes narrowed. Then what do you propose? Leave him here alone? The question hung in the air. Margaret felt her heart constrict at the impossible choice: bring Hank into danger or leave him unprotected. Porter, Sam said suddenly. Eli Porter. His place is east of here about 3 miles. It's out of the way, and nobody knows he's connected to us. Hank could stay there. You trust him that much? He saved my life twice during the war. I'd trust him with anything. Margaret thought of the doctor's weathered face, his careful hands, the way he'd looked at her with something like compassion. All right, she said slowly. But I want to talk to Hank first. I want to explain in the morning. Sam's voice was gentle but firm. Let him sleep now. He'll need his strength. The night crawled by. Margaret dozed fitfully in the chair, jerking awake at every sound. When the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, she felt like she hadn't slept at all. Waking Hank was one of the hardest things she'd ever done. Mama! He rubbed his eyes, confused. What's happening? I need to tell you something, sweetheart. Margaret sat on the edge of his bed, taking his small hands in hers. Mr. Thornton and I have to go somewhere today, somewhere important. Hank's face immediately clouded with fear. You're leaving me? Only for a little while. You're going to stay with Dr. Porter, you remember him. He's going to keep you safe until we get back. But I want to come with you. His voice cracked. Please, Mama, don't leave me behind. Margaret felt her heart breaking. She pulled him into her arms, holding him tight against her chest. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But what we have to do is dangerous, and I need to know you're somewhere safe. That's the only way I can focus on what needs to be done. What if you don't come back? The question hit her like a physical blow. She pulled back to look into his face, so young, so serious, so much like Thomas in the set of his jaw. I'm coming back, she said fiercely. I promise you, Henry Thomas Caldwell, I am coming back for you. You can't promise that. Nobody can promise that. 8 years old, and already he understood what adults spent their whole lives trying to deny. You're right, Margaret admitted. I can't promise nothing will happen, but I can promise that I will fight with everything I have to get back to you, and so will Mr. Thornton. We're not going to let the bad men win. Hank was quiet for a moment. Then, Mr. Thornton's a good man, isn't he, Mama? Yes, sweetheart. He is. He looks at you the way Papa used to. Margaret's breath caught. What do you mean? Like you're the most important thing in the whole world. Hank's eyes were old beyond their years. Like he'd do anything to keep you safe. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain to her 8-year-old son the complicated tangle of feelings she was only beginning to understand herself. Do you like him, Mama? The way you liked Papa? Margaret hesitated. Then, because she'd always tried to be honest with her son, I think I might. Is that okay with you? Hank considered this seriously. Papa would want you to be happy. He told me that once when he was sick. He said, take care of your mother and make sure she finds someone who makes her smile. Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks. He said it was a secret just between us. Hank's lower lip trembled. I've been waiting to tell you until I found someone good enough. Oh, sweetheart. Margaret pulled him close again, overwhelmed by love and grief. and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. "I love you so much." "I love you too, Mama. Come back to me." "I will. I swear it." The ride to Porter's place took less than an hour. The doctor greeted them at his door, his face grim but unsurprised. "Sam sent word last night," he explained, ushering them inside. "I've got a room ready for the boy." Saying goodbye to Hank nearly broke Margaret. He clung to her neck, his small body shaking with suppressed sobs, and it took every ounce of willpower she possessed to gently disengage his arms and step back. "Be brave," she whispered. "I'll be back before you know it." Sam knelt down to the boy's level. "You look after Dr. Porter while we're gone. Understand he's getting old and needs someone to keep him out of trouble." Despite everything, Hank almost smiled. "Yes, sir." "Good man." They mounted their horses and rode away without looking back. Margaret knew if she turned around, she'd lose her nerve entirely. The ride to Silver Creek passed in tense silence. They stuck to back trails, avoiding the main road where they might be spotted. Every rustle in the underbrush, every distant bird call, sent Margaret's heart racing. They reached the outskirts of town just before noon. "We'll leave the horses here," Sam said, dismounting near a grove of trees about half a mile from the main street. "Go in on foot, less noticeable." Margaret knotted her throat too tight for words. They approached the church from behind, using buildings and fences for cover. The town seemed quiet, too quiet maybe. Or maybe that was just her fear talking. The back door of the church was unlocked. They slipped inside, moving through the dim interior toward the altar. "There." Margaret pointed to a spot behind the wooden platform. "Third board from the left." Sam kept watch while she knelt and worked the board loose with her fingers. Her heart hammered as she reached into the dark space beneath. Her hand closed on paper. "Got it." She pulled out the packet, a thick envelope slightly dusty but intact. "It's all here. Everything. Then let's go." They turned toward the back door and froze. A man stood in the doorway. Not one of Winslow's hired guns, but someone worse. Deputy Marshal Floyd Jennings, his badge catching the light, his hand resting on his holstered pistol. "Well, well," he said with an unpleasant smile. "Mrs. Caldwell, we've been looking all over for you." "Floyd," Sam's voice was carefully neutral. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same, Sam. Word is you've been harboring a fugitive. Murder suspect, no less." Jennings's eyes moved to the envelope in Margaret's hands. "What have you got there?" "Nothing that concerns you." "See, that's where you're wrong." Jennings stepped forward, and Margaret saw his hand tighten on his pistol grip. "Everything in this town concerns me, especially when it involves a woman wanted for killing Garrett Winslow's business partner." "I didn't kill anyone," Margaret said sharply. "And you know it. You know exactly what Winslow is and what he's done. What I know is that you're wanted by the law." Jennings' smile widened. "And there's a significant reward for your capture. Now you can come quietly or—" "Or what?" Sam cut in. "You'll shoot us in a church. Even you aren't that stupid, Floyd." Jennings' smile faltered. "Watch your mouth, Thornton. I've known you 15 years. You're lazy, you're corrupt, and you're too scared of powerful men to ever do the right thing. But you're not a killer." Sam took a step forward. "Let us walk out of here. Pretend you never saw us. That's all I'm asking." "And what do I tell Winslow?" "Tell him whatever you want. Tell him we were never here. Tell him you searched and didn't find anything." Sam's voice hardened. "Or tell him the truth and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, because if anything happens to this woman or her son, I will come for you. And you know I'm a man of my word." The deputy's face had gone pale. Margaret could see the calculations running behind his eyes, fear of Winslow warring with fear of Sam. "You're making a mistake," Jennings said finally, but he stepped aside from the doorway. "Winslow has too much power. He'll destroy you." "Maybe." Sam grabbed Margaret's arm and guided her toward the door. "But at least I'll go down fighting for something that matters." They were almost through the door when Jennings spoke again. "She's got a boy, doesn't she? A young son?" Margaret froze. "I've heard things," Jennings continued, his voice taking on a cruel edge, "about where that boy might be hiding. Winslow's men are very thorough in their research." Sam moved so fast Margaret barely saw it. One moment he was beside her. The next he had Jennings pinned against the wall, forearm pressed against his throat. "If you go near that child," Sam said, his voice deadly quiet, "if you tell anyone where he is, if you even think about using him as leverage, I will kill you, Floyd. Not a threat, a promise." "I don't know anything," Jennings gasped. "I was just—" "Choose your next words very carefully." "I don't know anything, I swear. Winslow doesn't tell me everything. I was bluffing, trying to scare you." Sam held him for another long moment, then released him with a shove that sent the deputy stumbling. "If I find out you're lying—" "I'm not. I swear on my mother's grave." Sam grabbed Margaret's hand. "We're leaving, now." They ran. Behind them, Margaret heard Jennings shouting for help, for backup she couldn't tell. They sprinted through back alleys and side streets, heading for the grove where they'd left the horses. They'd almost reached it when the first shot rang out. Margaret felt something hot graze her arm, a bullet she realized distantly tearing through fabric and flesh. She stumbled, but didn't fall. "Go!" Sam pushed her ahead of him, turning to fire back at their pursuers. "Get to the horses!" She ran, reached the grove, grabbed Daisy's reins with trembling hands. Sam was right behind her, mounting Ranger in one fluid motion. "Ride, don't stop for anything." They flew through the trees, branches whipping at their faces, bullets cracking through leaves around them. Margaret couldn't see their pursuers, but she could hear them hoofbeats and shouts getting closer. "There!" Sam pointed to a narrow ravine ahead. "We can lose them in there." They plunged into the ravine, the walls rising around them, cutting off the sound of pursuit. Sam led them through a series of twists and turns that Margaret couldn't have navigated alone, paths he must have learned in his years of solitary riding through this country. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, he pulled up. "Listen." Margaret strained her ears. Nothing. No hoofbeats. No shouts. "I think we lost them. For now." Sam turned to look at her, and his face went pale. "You're bleeding." Margaret looked down at her arm. Blood was soaking through her sleeve, spreading in a dark stain. The pain hit her, then sharp and burning. "It's just a graze. I'll be fine." "Let me see." Sam dismounted and reached for her arm, his movements gentle despite the urgency in his voice. He pushed back her sleeve, examined the wound, and let out a breath. "You're right. It's not deep, but we need to clean it." "We need to get to Denver," Margaret countered. "Every minute we wait is another minute Winslow has to find us." "Maggie." "Sam." She met his eyes. "I've come too far to stop now. A scratch isn't going to kill me, but staying still might." He looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, but we stop in an hour to bandage that properly." "Fair enough." They rode on through the afternoon, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. The envelope pressed against Margaret's chest, where she'd tucked it inside her dress, proof of Winslow's crimes, worth more than gold. As the sun began to dip toward the western mountains, Sam pulled up again. "Something's wrong." Margaret looked around, but saw nothing. "What is it?" "Smoke." He pointed toward the horizon. "Coming from the direction of Porter's place." Margaret's blood turned to ice. "Hank!" She kicked Daisy into a gallop before Sam could stop her, racing toward the distant plume of smoke, her wounded arm forgotten, her heart screaming her son's name. The smoke grew thicker as Margaret rode, filling her lungs with ash and terror. Every stride of the horse beneath her was too slow, every second an eternity. Her wounded arm screamed in protest, but she barely felt it. Nothing existed except the desperate need to reach her son. Sam caught up to her, his voice cutting through the wind. "Maggie, wait. We don't know what we're riding into. My son is in there. And if Winslow's men are waiting for us, you'll ride straight into a trap." She didn't care. Couldn't care. Every instinct she possessed was screaming one thing: get to Hank. They crested the final ridge, and Margaret's heart stopped. Porter's cabin was burning. Flames leapt from the roof, devouring the structure from the inside out. And in front of the inferno, a cluster of figures, horses, men, and two smaller shapes being held by the arms. "No!" The word came out broken. "No, no, no!" Sam grabbed her reins, forcing her horse to stop. "Look. Really look." Margaret blinked through her tears, forcing herself to focus. The two smaller figures, one was Hank struggling against the grip of a large man in a dark coat. The other was Porter, bloodied but alive, being held by a second man. And standing apart from them, watching the cabin burn with cold satisfaction, was Garrett Winslow himself. "He came himself," Margaret breathed. "He actually came." "That's either very good or very bad for us." Sam's voice was tight. "How many men?" Margaret counted quickly. 4, 5 including Winslow. "They don't know we're here yet. That's our advantage." "Our advantage, Sam? They have my son." "I know." His hand found hers, squeezing hard. "But if we charge in there without a plan, we all die, including Hank. Is that what you want?" The logic cut through her panic. She forced herself to breathe, to think. "What do we do?" Sam was already scanning the terrain. "Circle around. Come at them from 2 angles. I'll draw their fire, you get to Hank." "That's suicide." "That's the only chance we've got." His eyes met hers. "I told you I'd fight for something that matters. This is me keeping that promise. Sam, go. Now. Before they spot us." Margaret wanted to argue, wanted to grab him and shake him and make him understand that he mattered too, that losing him would break something in her she'd only just begun to rebuild. But there was no time. She kicked her horse into motion, circling wide through the trees. The next few minutes were the longest of her life. She dismounted about 50 yards from the group, creeping forward on foot, with her rifle clutched in trembling hands. Through the smoke and chaos, she could see Hank's face, tear-streaked, but defiant, still struggling against his captor. "That's my boy," she thought fiercely. "Don't give up. I'm coming." Sam's shot rang out without warning. One of Winslow's men dropped, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, drawing weapons, searching for the source of the attack. In the confusion, Margaret moved. She burst from cover, running straight for Hank. His captor saw her coming, tried to bring his gun up, but she was faster. The rifle butt connected with his jaw, and he went down hard, releasing Hank as he fell. "Mama, run!" She shoved him toward the trees. "Run, and don't look back." But Hank didn't run. He grabbed her hand and pulled his small fingers surprisingly strong. "This way, Dr. Porter showed me. There's a root cellar." More shots rang out. Margaret heard Sam's voice shouting something she couldn't make out. She let Hank lead her, trusting his knowledge of the terrain, trusting the survival instincts she'd apparently passed on to him. They dropped into a dugout, hidden behind a collapsed shed, the entrance barely visible through the smoke. Margaret pulled Hank down beside her, wrapping her body around his. "Are you hurt?" She ran her hands over him, checking for wounds. "Did they hurt you?" "I'm okay, Mama." His voice was shaky but steady. "Dr. Porter hid me when they came. They found me anyway, but they didn't hurt me. The mean one, the one in charge, he said I was leverage." "Winslow." "He said you'd come for me. He said you'd walk right into his trap." Hank's eyes were wide. "He was right, wasn't he?" "Yes, sweetheart, he was right." Margaret pulled him closer. "Because there's nothing in this world that would stop me from coming for you." The sounds of fighting continued above them. Gunshots, shouts, horses screaming. Margaret held Hank and prayed. Then the noise stopped. Silence broken only by the crackle of flames. "Stay here," Margaret whispered. "Mama, no." "Stay here." She kissed his forehead. "I have to see what's happening. I'll come back for you." She climbed out of the cellar, slowly, rifle ready. The smoke was thick enough to provide cover as she moved toward where she'd last heard Sam's voice. What she found made her blood run cold. Sam was on his knees in the dirt, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Two of Winslow's men lay motionless nearby, but the third had a pistol pressed to Sam's temple. And Garrett Winslow stood over them both, that same cold smile on his face. "Mrs. Caldwell." His voice carried easily through the smoke. "So good of you to join us. I was just explaining to Mr. Thornton that this little adventure of yours is over." Margaret stepped into the open rifle raised. "Let him go." "Ah, I don't think so." Winslow gestured to his remaining man. "You see, I've learned something valuable today. Something about leverage and its proper application." His smile widened. "You came for your son because you love him. Now I have the rancher. The question is, do you love him enough to trade? The documents, Mrs. Caldwell. I know you have them. Give them to me and Mr. Thornton lives. Refuse and my associate puts a bullet in his brain." Margaret's hands were steady on the rifle, but her mind was racing. She'd tucked the envelope into her dress before the ride. It was still there, pressed against her chest. "Don't do it, Maggie." Sam's voice was rough with pain but determined. "Don't give him anything. Get Hank and run." "Shut up." The man behind him pressed the gun harder against his skull. "How touching," Winslow observed. "The noble sacrifice. But we both know Mrs. Caldwell isn't going to let you die, Mr. Thornton. Not after she's come so far." He was right. Margaret knew it with terrible certainty. She couldn't watch Sam die, not for documents, not for justice, not for anything. But she also couldn't let Winslow walk away. If he got those papers back, he'd destroy them. And then he'd destroy her and Sam and everyone who knew his secrets. He couldn't afford to leave witnesses. "You'll kill us anyway," she said. "Even if I give you what you want." "Perhaps," Winslow shrugged. "But perhaps not. I'm a businessman, Mrs. Caldwell. Dead bodies attract attention. Questions. Investigations. It's much simpler to let you disappear, take your boy and your rancher, and vanish into some distant territory where no one will ever believe your stories. You expect me to trust that. I expect you to make the practical choice. The documents or his life, right now." Margaret's mind worked frantically. She needed time, needed a distraction, needed Mama. Hank's voice came from behind her. She spun to find him standing at the edge of the clearing, his face pale but set with determination. "I told you to stay hidden." "I couldn't." His eyes were fixed on Winslow. "I couldn't hide while the bad men hurt the people I love." Winslow laughed, an ugly, dismissive sound. "The child thinks he can help. How adorable." But something in Hank's expression made Margaret pause. There was a look in his eyes she'd never seen before, a calculating look far too old for his 8 years. "I know what you did," Hank said, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing. "I know you steal from people. I know you hurt my mama. And I know something else too." "Oh." Winslow's amusement flickered. "And what might that be?" "Dr. Porter wasn't the only one who hid me." Hank's chin lifted. "Before the bad men came, he gave me something. Something important. He said if anything happened, I should keep it safe." Margaret's breath caught. Porter. Of course, if he'd suspected trouble, he would have made contingencies. Winslow's face had gone pale. "You're lying. You're a child. He gave me papers." Hank reached into his shirt and pulled out a folded document. "Papers with your name on them. He said they were copies. He said there were more copies hidden all over at the newspaper, at the church, at the marshal's office in Denver." The words hit Winslow like physical blows. Margaret could see his composure cracking, could see the fear beneath his confident mask. "Give me that," he snarled, stepping toward Hank. "Don't you touch him." Margaret's rifle came up. "Don't you dare touch my son." "You won't shoot. You're not a killer." "You don't know what I am. You have no idea what a mother will do to protect her child." For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. The fire crackled. Smoke drifted between them. Margaret could feel her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then, from somewhere behind Winslow, a new voice spoke. "I reckon you boys better drop those guns." Everyone turned. Standing at the edge of the clearing, rifle raised, was Floyd Jennings. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood half a dozen men townspeople Margaret recognized from Silver Creek. The blacksmith, the general store owner, the newspaper editor, all armed, all looking at Winslow with expressions of cold fury. "Floyd!" Winslow's voice cracked. "What is this? We have an arrangement." "Had an arrangement." Jennings spat on the ground. "That was before your boys burned down the church trying to find those papers, before Father Morrison nearly died in the flames, before I realized that the money you've been paying me came from stealing wages from my own neighbors. I'll double your payment, triple it. Some things can't be bought." Jennings cocked his rifle. "Drop your weapons, all of you, now." For a moment, Margaret thought Winslow might resist. She could see it in his eyes, the calculation, the desperate search for an escape. Then his shoulders slumped, and he nodded to his man. Guns clattered to the ground. Sam moved fast, scrambling away from his captor and grabbing one of the fallen pistols. He turned it on Winslow, his hand steady despite the blood still streaming down his face. "It's over," Margaret said quietly. "You're finished." Winslow's face twisted with hatred. "You think this changes anything? I have lawyers, connections. I'll be out of jail before—" "I don't think so." The newspaper editor stepped forward, a small man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. "I've seen the documents Dr. Porter distributed. There's enough evidence there to put you away for a lifetime. Fraud, theft, conspiracy to commit murder." He smiled thinly. "You're going to be front-page news, Mr. Winslow, nationwide." Margaret felt her knees go weak with relief. She lowered her rifle and opened her arms, and Hank ran into them, burying his face against her shoulder. "You were so brave," she whispered into his hair. So brave." "I was scared," he admitted. "But I remembered what you said, about fighting for what matters. I'm proud of you. So proud." Sam appeared at her side, his hand finding hers. His face was battered and bloody, but his eyes were clear. "It's over," he said. "Maggie, it's really over." She looked at him. This man who had saved her, fought for her, nearly died for her. This man who had looked at her broken pieces and seen something worth protecting. "Not over," she said softly. "Just beginning." The aftermath unfolded over the next several hours. Winslow and his remaining men were bound and loaded onto horses for the ride to Silver Creek. Jennings, apparently determined to prove his change of heart personally, escorted them along with the armed townspeople who'd followed him. "I can't undo what I did," he told Margaret before leaving. "All those years looking the other way. But maybe I can start making it right." "Why?" she asked. "Why now? What changed?" Jennings looked toward where Sam stood with Hank, the big man listening patiently to the boy's excited recounting of his adventures. "I watched you ride toward that smoke," he said quietly, "knowing what was waiting, knowing you might die. And I thought about my sister. She's got kids about your boy's age. If she was in trouble, I'd want someone to help her, even if it was dangerous, even if it cost them." He mounted his horse. "Take care of that family of yours, Mrs. Caldwell. They're worth fighting for." After he rode off, Margaret went to find Porter. The doctor was sitting against a tree, Ruth tending to his wounds with materials salvaged from the burned cabin. "You saved my son," Margaret said, kneeling beside him. "You saved all of us." "Seemed like the right thing to do." Porter winced as Ruth cleaned a cut on his forehead. "Besides, I made copies of those documents weeks ago, just in case. When Winslow's men showed up, I knew exactly what to do with them." "The boy helped," Ruth added. "Eli says he was braver than men twice his age. He's his mother's son. Porter said with a faint smile. Margaret found Sam standing alone near the smoldering ruins of the cabin, staring at the destruction. She approached quietly, sliding her hand into his. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that a few weeks ago my biggest problem was whether the fence in the north pasture needed mending." He turned to look at her. "Now I've got bullet wounds, a burned-down friend's house, and a wanted criminal headed to jail." Regretting any of it? Not 1 second. His hand tightened around hers. "I told you I was tired of being dead. This is what being alive feels like, messy and complicated and terrifying and wonderful all at once." "Sam." Margaret stepped closer, looking up into his battered face. "When Winslow had that gun to your head when I thought I might lose you." "I know. I realized something I've been too scared to admit even to myself. Maggie." His voice roughened. "You don't have to. I love you." The words came out clear and strong. "I love you, Samuel Thornton, not because you saved me, not because you protected my son, because you looked at a woman who was broken and scared and running from everything, and you saw someone worth caring about." Sam was very still. Margaret could see something moving behind his eyes, old pain warring with new hope. "I buried that part of myself," he said finally. 6 years ago, I put it in the ground with Emma and Sarah. Told myself I'd never dig it up again. And now," he reached up to cup her face, his calloused thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Now I think maybe they'd want me to be happy. Maybe that's what loving someone really means, wanting them to live even after you're gone." He kissed her, then gentle and fierce all at once. Margaret felt something crack open inside her, not breaking, but blooming. The tight knot of grief and fear that had lived in her chest for 3 years finally beginning to unwind. When they broke apart, Hank was standing a few feet away watching them with a small smile. "Does this mean Mr. Thornton's going to be my new papa?" he asked. Margaret laughed, actually laughed for the first time in longer than she could remember. "What do you think?" Hank considered this seriously, then walked over to Sam and looked up at him. "My real papa's dead," he said. "He was a good man, and I miss him. But he told me to take care of Mama and make sure she found someone who made her smile." He stuck out his small hand. "You make her smile, so I reckon you'll do." Sam took the offered hand and shook it solemnly. "I'll do my best to live up to that, son." "You better. 'Cause if you don't, I know where Miss Ruth keeps the extra rifle." Ruth's cackle of laughter broke the moment, and suddenly everyone was laughing, Sam and Margaret and Hank and even Porter, despite his injuries. They were battered and exhausted, and standing in the ruins of what had been a terrible day. But they were alive. They were together. And for the first time in a long time, Margaret believed they might actually have a future. The trial of Garrett Winslow lasted 3 weeks and drew spectators from as far as Denver. Margaret testified on the second day. She walked into that courtroom with her head held high, her wounded arm still bandaged beneath her sleeve, and told the whole truth, every detail of Winslow's fraud, every threat he'd made, every person he'd hurt. When the defense attorney tried to discredit her, calling her a desperate widow with an axe to grind, she met his eyes without flinching. "I am a widow," she said clearly. "And yes, I was desperate. Desperate enough to take a job with a man I didn't know. Desperate enough to stay quiet when I should have spoken up. But I'm not lying, sir. Every document and evidence tells the same story I'm telling. And if you think being a widow makes me a liar, then I'd say you haven't known many widows." The courtroom erupted. The judge had to bang his gavel for nearly a minute to restore order. Sam testified the next day. He spoke quietly without drama, laying out exactly what he'd seen and done. When asked why he'd gotten involved, he gave an answer that Margaret would never forget. "Because someone left a woman and her child to die on the side of a road," he said. "And I wasn't raised to look away from that kind of wrong." Hank testified too, despite Margaret's protests. The judge had insisted the boy was a key witness, having been present when Winslow's men attacked Porter's cabin. Margaret held her breath through every moment of his testimony, watching her son face down the man who had terrorized them. "Were you afraid?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, sir." Hank's voice was steady. "Real afraid." "But you still helped Dr. Porter distribute those documents. You still held on to them when Winslow's men came. Why?" Hank glanced at Margaret, then at Sam, then back to the prosecutor. "Because my mama taught me that doing the right thing is more important than being safe. And because Mr. Thornton showed me what it looks like to fight for people you love." In the gallery, Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. Sam's hand found hers and squeezed. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder. The sentence: 30 years in federal prison with no possibility of early release. When the judge pronounced the sentence, Winslow's mask finally cracked. He lunged toward the witness box where Margaret sat, his face twisted with rage. "You think this is over?" he screamed as bailiffs wrestled him down. "I have friends, I have resources. You'll never be safe, you hear me, never." Sam was on his feet before anyone could stop him. He stepped between Winslow and Margaret, his body a wall of protective fury. "You're done threatening her," he said, his voice carrying through the chaos. "You're done threatening anyone. And if I ever hear of you or anyone connected to you coming near my family prison walls, won't be enough to protect you from me." The bailiffs dragged Winslow away. The courtroom slowly calmed, and Margaret found herself wrapped in Sam's arms, shaking with relief and exhaustion, and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. "He's right about one thing," she whispered against Sam's chest. "He has friends, powerful friends. What if... then we deal with them too?" Sam's arms tightened around her. "Together, like we've dealt with everything else." "I'm tired of fighting." "I know, but you won't have to fight alone anymore." He pulled back to look at her face. "That's what family means, Maggie. Sharing the load." Family. The word settled over her like a warm blanket. Is that what we are now? Family. "I reckon we've earned the right to call ourselves that." Sam's thumb brushed her cheek. "If you'll have us." "Sam Thornton, are you proposing to me in the middle of a courtroom?" His weathered face cracked into that rare, genuine smile. "Seems fitting, don't it, considering how we met?" Margaret laughed a real laugh, full and free. "I was bleeding in a ditch when we met. And you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." "You're ridiculous." "Maybe, but I'm also serious." Sam took both her hands in his. "Margaret Caldwell, I've spent 6 years hiding from life, running from anything that might make me feel something. And then you showed up and made me feel everything: fear and hope and anger and love. So much love, I don't know what to do with it all." Margaret's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "I'm not a young man," Sam continued. "I'm not rich, and I'm not much good at pretty words. But I'll work every day to deserve you. I'll protect your son like he was my own. I'll build a life with you that's worth living." His voice roughened. "So what do you say, Maggie? Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out without hesitation. "Yes, Samuel Thornton. I'll marry you." The courtroom, still half full of spectators and reporters and curious townspeople, erupted in applause. Sam pulled her into a kiss that made Margaret forget anyone else existed. When they finally broke apart, Hank was standing beside them, his face split in an enormous grin. "Does this mean I can call you Pa now?" he asked Sam. Sam looked down at the boy who had stolen his heart as surely as his mother had. "I'd be honored," he said quietly. Hank threw his arms around Sam's waist. Margaret wrapped her arms around them both, and for a long, perfect moment, the three of them stood there, finally whole. Ruth was the first to find them after they left the courthouse. She'd been waiting outside with Porter, both of them too anxious to sit through the final proceedings. "Well?" Ruth demanded. "What happened? Is he—" "30 years," Margaret said. He's going to prison for 30 years. Ruth's weathered face crumpled with relief. Thank the Lord. There's more. Margaret held out her left hand where Sam had improvised a ring from a piece of wire, a temporary measure, until he could get something proper. Sam asked me to marry him. Ruth stared at the makeshift ring. Then she stared at Sam. Then she let out a whoop of joy that made half the street turn around. About time. She grabbed Sam by the shoulders and shook him. I've been waiting 6 years for you to wake up and start living again. Took a woman half dead in a ditch to do it, but better late than never. Ruth! Sam started embarrassed. Don't you Ruth me, Samuel Thornton. This is the best news I've heard since before the war. She pulled Margaret into a fierce embrace. Welcome to the family, child, such as it is. Such as it is, Margaret repeated, hugging her back. That's all I've ever wanted. Porter shook Sam's hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. You deserve this, he said quietly. Both of you. After everything, you deserve some happiness. The wedding took place a month later in the rebuilt church in Silver Creek. It was a simple ceremony. Neither Sam nor Margaret wanted anything elaborate. Just close friends, a few flowers, and the words that would bind them together. Father Morrison officiated, his voice still raspy from the smoke inhalation he'd suffered when Winslow's men burned the original church. He'd refused to let anyone else perform the ceremony. These two came through fire to find each other, he said. Seems right that I should be the one to marry them. The guest list was small but meaningful. Ruth, of course, standing proud in her best dress. Porter cleaned up and sober for the first time in months. Floyd Jennings, still working to redeem himself, had helped organize security for the ceremony. Even some of the townspeople, who'd originally looked away while Winslow terrorized their neighbors, came their presence a silent apology, a recognition of wrongs that couldn't be undone, but could at least be acknowledged. Hank stood beside Sam as his best man. Margaret had offered to find someone else, someone more traditional, but Sam had refused. That boy's the reason I'm standing here, he said. He showed me what courage looks like before I remembered what it felt like. When Margaret walked toward the altar, Hank reached out and took her hand, placing it in Sam's. I'm giving her to you, he said, his small voice carrying through the church. Because my papa would have wanted me to, and because I know you'll take care of her. Sam knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. I'm not taking her from you, he said. I'm joining you, both of you. We're a family now, equal partners. Hank nodded solemnly. Equal partners. The vows were simple. No elaborate poetry, no grand declarations. Just two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, promising to keep finding each other every day for the rest of their lives. I was alone when you found me, Margaret said. Broken and bleeding and certain I was going to die. You gave me back my life, Sam, and now I want to spend that life with you. Sam's voice was rough when he responded. I was dead before I found you. Walking around going through the motions but dead inside. You woke me up, Maggie. You and Hank. You made me remember what it feels like to care about something, to fight for something, to love something. Do you take this woman to be your wife? Father Morrison asked. I do. And do you take this man to be your husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Father Morrison smiled. You may kiss your bride. The kiss was long and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Hank had squeezed between them, demanding to be included. Family hug, he declared. Sam laughed a full, genuine laugh that Margaret had heard only a handful of times. Family hug. The three of them stood there wrapped in each other's arms while the congregation applauded. And Margaret thought, this is what I almost lost. This is what I almost gave up. She would never take it for granted again. The celebration afterward was lively and long. Food and music and dancing, things the town of Silver Creek hadn't had much cause to enjoy in recent years. But Winslow's removal had lifted something from the community. People laughed more easily, spoke more freely, started to rebuild what had been broken. "You did this," Ruth said, finding Margaret at the edge of the festivities. "You and Sam, you reminded people what it looks like to stand up for what's right. We almost didn't survive it. But you did, and that matters more than the almost." Margaret watched her new husband across the room. He was showing Hank how to dance, guiding the boy through clumsy steps with infinite patience. Hank was laughing, that pure, uncomplicated joy of a child who finally feels safe. "I used to dream about this," Margaret said softly. "When Thomas was dying, when I was alone with Hank and the debts, and no idea how to keep going, I used to dream that someday, somehow, things would get better. I stopped believing it could actually happen. And now I'm afraid to believe it. Afraid that if I let myself be happy, something will come along and take it away." Ruth's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "That fear never goes away completely," she said. "I've been alive long enough to know that, but you can't let fear steal the joy you've earned. You fought for this, Margaret. You bled for it. Don't waste it by being too scared to enjoy it." Across the room, Sam caught Margaret's eye and smiled. That rare, transforming smile that still made her heart skip. "You're right," Margaret said. "You're absolutely right." She crossed the room to her husband and son. Sam's arm came around her waist, pulling her close. Hank grabbed her hand, still bouncing to the music. "Dance with us, Mama." "I don't know the steps." "Neither do we," Sam admitted. "We're making it up as we go." Margaret laughed. "That seems to be our specialty." They danced together, awkward and imperfect, and absolutely wonderful. The months that followed were not without challenges. Rebuilding the ranch after weeks of neglect took hard work. Helping the community recover from Winslow's predations required patience and persistence. And learning to be a family, truly a family, not just three people living under the same roof, took constant effort and communication. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. Hank thrived under Sam's steady guidance. The boy who'd been forced to grow up too fast finally had permission to be a child again. He learned to ride properly, to fish, to track animals through the forest. He also learned gentler things, how to tend a garden, how to care for livestock, how to build something with his own two hands. "He reminds me of Emma," Sam admitted one evening, watching Hank chase fireflies through the tall grass. "Not in looks he's all you, but in spirit. That fierce determination, that stubborn courage." "Is that hard for you?" Margaret asked. Being reminded of her. "It was at first. Made me want to pull away, keep my distance." Sam's arm tightened around her. "But now I think she'd be glad. Glad I found someone to love again. Glad her memory made me a better father instead of pushing me away." "You are a good father." "I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do." Ruth stayed on at the ranch. She'd become as essential as the land itself, cooking, cleaning, offering unsolicited advice about everything from child rearing to crop rotation. When Margaret suggested she might want her own space, Ruth had scoffed. "And miss watching you two figure out married life? Not likely." Porter visited often, his sobriety strengthening with each passing week. He and Sam would sit on the porch in the evenings, talking about the old days, processing memories they'd both buried too long. "The war broke us both," Porter said one night. "But maybe being broken isn't the end. Maybe it's just a different kind of beginning." The first anniversary of their wedding arrived with the kind of perfect summer day that made Colorado feel like the promised land. Margaret woke to find Sam already gone from their bed. She pulled on her robe and went looking for him, finally finding him on the porch, watching the sunrise. Couldn't sleep. Too much to be grateful for. He pulled her down onto his lap. "1 year ago today, you made me the happiest man in the territory." "Only the territory?" "All right, the whole damn country." Margaret laughed and kissed him. 1 year. Sometimes it feels like forever. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. That's how you know it's real. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the light spread across the land they'd built together. "I've been thinking," Sam said finally, "about the future." "What about it?" "This ranch, it's enough for us now. But Hank's getting bigger, and maybe someday there'll be more than just Hank." Margaret's heart stuttered. "More." "I'm not assuming anything. Just saying if you wanted, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea." "Sam Thornton, are you saying you want more children?" His face reddened slightly. "I'm saying I'd be grateful for whatever family you want to give me. If that includes more little ones, I'd welcome them. If it doesn't, I'm more than happy with what we have." Margaret felt tears pricking at her eyes. I thought maybe you wouldn't want to risk that kind of loss again." "I thought so too for a long time." Sam's hand found hers. "But then I realized not loving someone doesn't protect you from losing them. It just means you spend your life missing something you never let yourself have." "When did you get so wise?" "I married a woman who makes me think." He kissed her temple. "So what do you say? Should we let the future be whatever it's going to be?" "I say yes." Margaret leaned into him. "I say yes to whatever comes next." Hank found them there when he woke up, still wrapped in each other's arms. "Are you two being mushy again?" "Very mushy," Sam confirmed. "Want to join us?" Hank pretended to consider this. "Only if there's breakfast after." "Ruth's making flapjacks." "Then I reckon I can tolerate some mushiness." He squeezed between them on the porch chair, his growing legs dangling over the side. Margaret wrapped one arm around him, while keeping the other linked with Sam's. "This is what I always wanted," Hank said quietly. "When Papa died, I used to pray for a family again. A real family. And now I have one." Margaret kissed the top of his head. "We all have one." "Because you didn't give up," Sam added. "Either of you. No matter how hard it got, you kept fighting, kept believing." "So did you," Hank pointed out. "You could have left us on that road." "No." Sam's voice was firm. "I couldn't. Some things are meant to be. And the three of us, we were meant to find each other." Margaret felt the truth of it settle into her bones. All the pain, all the loss, all the desperate running and fighting, it had led them here. To this porch, this ranch, this family forged in fire and tempered by love. "What do we do now?" Hank asked. "Now that the bad guys are gone and everything's okay?" Sam considered the question seriously. "Now we live. We work the land, we build something good, and we never forget how lucky we are to have each other." "That sounds like a lot of work." "The best things always are." Ruth's voice carried from inside the house. "Flapjacks are ready. Get in here before they get cold." The three of them stood stretching muscles stiff from sitting. "Race you to the table," Hank challenged. "You're on," Sam said. They ran, all three of them like children, laughing and jostling each other through the door. And Margaret, watching her husband and son tumble into the kitchen with Ruth scolding them about tracking dirt on her clean floor, felt her heart overflow with a joy she'd once thought impossible. She'd been beaten and left for dead on the side of a road. She'd lost everything and nearly lost hope itself. But she'd survived. She'd fought. And she'd found something worth more than survival. She'd found home. The road that had nearly killed her had led her exactly where she needed to be, not to an ending, but to a beginning. A family built from broken pieces, stronger for the cracks that let the light in. And that Margaret Caldwell Thornton knew with absolute certainty was worth every single fight it had taken to get here.